Hello, welcome to the programme. We're on BBC2 and the BBC News channel until 11. Throughout the morning, we will bring you the latest breaking news and developing stories. And as always, we are keen to hear from you on all the stories we're talking about today. You can get in touch in the usual ways, and don't forget the hashtag #VictoriaLive. If you text, you will be charged at the standard network rate. And of course, you can watch the programme online wherever you are via the BBC News app or on the website bbc.co.uk/Victoria. Now, should tackling in school rugby be banned? Well, that is what dozens of doctors and health experts are calling for, saying injuries from this high-impact collision sport can have lifelong consequences for children. Supporters say rugby builds character and banning tackles would make it less challenging. But critics argue that 2/3 of injuries in youth rugby and most concussions are down to tackles, and they want schools to move to touch and non-contact rugby. The Rugby Football Union is in the middle of a programme aimed at introducing rugby to 1 million children in state schools across England. We are really keen to hear from you this morning. If you've got kids at school and they play rugby, do get in touch. Tell us what you think about it. Professor Eric Anderson is one of 70 doctors and health experts who've written to the government calling for a ban on tackles. Also in our Belfast studio, David Ross, who was 18 when he broke his neck playing school rugby. He is now paralysed from the neck down, and he is hoping to play wheelchair rugby at the Tokyo Olympics. Also from Bath, we're joined by Matt Perry, former rugby union fullback for Bath and an England international. Thank you all very much for joining us.
Morning, Joanna.
Morning. So, Eric, why do you think contact rugby should be banned in schools?
Children are compelled against their will to play contact rugby in school systems. Now, some children desire to play contact rugby, and there's a place for that. It's community level of rugby. But children and their parents are often compelled to play rugby as part of the national curriculum, and the Rugby Football Union desires to expand this play. What we're arguing is that the game is a great game, but it should be a game of touch in school systems.
What are the injury statistics that concern you?
Let's look at some of the latest research just recently released from Ulster. They followed 525 school-aged boys. Now, mind you, only boys are compelled to play rugby. 525 school-aged boys. There were 204 injuries that were so serious that the athletes couldn't play for 28 or more days. Amongst that group, there were 81 diagnosed concussions. Now, that's just diagnosed concussions. Concussions are difficult to diagnose. So if you're subjecting 81 out of every 525 children to concussion in the name of health and well-being, we're doing something wrong.
David, you were injured playing rugby at school, left paralysed as a result. Tell us what happened to you.
Well, I was 18 at the time, as you said. I was just on the ground. And the tackle happened beside me, and the two guys came down on top of me, and just my neck bent in a way it shouldn't have.
So playing a game changed your life completely. How do you feel about that?
No resentment at all towards the sport. It's a freak accident. These accidents can happen doing anything. I've met a lot of people who have broken their necks doing a lot of different things, and you know, I mean, rugby's such a small margin of these types of injuries, to be honest. So I mean, I can't blame rugby for the accident.
We're seeing pictures of you playing wheelchair rugby as you do now. What do you think about the suggestion that contact rugby should be banned to avoid injuries to kids in school?
It's something I don't agree with. I think that would just change the sport. I mean, rugby's a contact sport, and that's kind of the key element of the sport. So taking that out of the sport, it changes the sport for me, and it's something I just don't agree with. It's a great sport, and people who get involved in rugby, they know it's a contact sport, and they know what they're getting in for, and injury is part of all sport. So I mean, I think changing the sport is something that shouldn't be done.
But if it can be changed, just a simple change can be made, rugby can still be played, but without the tackling, and that could avoid injuries like the one you sustained. A lot of people are saying that would be a good thing.
I mean, taking the contact, like I said, contact is part of rugby, and it does change the sport completely. Whether you want to, it's a small. You say it's a small change, but it's a massive change for the sport of rugby. Rugby's a contact sport, so taking contact out of it changes the game.
Matt Perry, you played rugby for your career. How do you see this debate?
I agree with the argument that you can't force a child to do something against their will. But, you know, the data and the research that we have now, for me, it's down to individual responsibility. And there's a number of key parties that are involved. Parenting, we talk about coaching. I mean, you know, the professional game is actually is a lot safer than we think nowadays than where it was. There's always been a risk to rugby and to contact and to the tackle area. But now with the evidence that's coming through, we need to use the data in a pragmatic way to understand that if we lose the tackle in rugby, we've pretty much lost the game. For me, it's about coaching and regulating coaching to get outstanding coaches who are bringing talent through and training them technically to play on the values of what rugby, you know, is based on, and that's respect, self-awareness, understanding how to protect your own body, but also the body of your opponent. It's not a collision sport, it's a contact sport, and the shrewd players and teams are the ones that actually try and find the space. So I think it is a bit of a kind of nanny state, knowing that there's risk in all sports. You know, horse racing, you look at all kinds of different sports, there is a risk, and taking the tackle out of rugby, I think will ruin it.
Eric, these are two guys who know the sport well, and David himself badly injured as a result. Neither of them think that you're saying the right thing.
Of course, what they're saying is the sport of rugby. And the sport of rugby will survive, and the sport of rugby will survive for children who want to play it, who self-select into it. But horse racing is not part of the national curriculum. Touch rugby should be, not contact. The matter of educating children and how to tackle appropriately, studies of teachers, physical education teachers, show that only 14% feel that they're adequately trained to provide rugby tackle provision. There are no requirements for physical education teachers to have a level 4, 3, 2, or even 1 coaching certification. They're not required to have concussion training. They're not even required to have first aid training. So you have PE teachers who are wholly unable to provide proper rugby provision to children who don't want to play rugby. We shouldn't be compelling these children to do this. The Rugby Football Union should be paying attention to teaching appropriately in rugby leagues, but physical education is not sport. It is supposed to be about teaching education, about physicality, health, and well-being, not subjecting 10% of our students to concussion and 40 or 50% to serious injury.
I completely agree, and in many ways what you're talking about there is regulating coaching. When we hand our kids over to schools, we delegate responsibility, and that duty of care has to be upheld. If there's coaches who are technically coaching our kids to tackle wrongly, then that is not right. So we need to go back to the basics, look at the core values of the sport, and how are we training the next generation, because the uptake of kids wanting to play rugby is massive, and the World Cup and the rugby as a game, the market is really there. So we don't want to quash that talent, but we need to regulate coaching, and parents have a responsibility as well in terms of on the sidelines with their kids, not shouting smash them, but actually looking, you know, being more constructive about going back to the core values of rugby.
And unfortunately, parents don't have a choice here. They're compelled by the homeschool contract for their kids to do as required in physical education. So we have letters from parents whose children have broken legs playing rugby on the field of PE, who don't want to play, who the school is compelling to play. So we need to change the system drastically, and it begins with simply saying, in the school system, let's just play touch. There are benefits. Touch is a faster game. Studies show that children find touch a more enjoyable game. And then perhaps we could even look to expanding touch rugby to women. Because right now, girls and women are not forced to play rugby in school settings like boys are.
So take those 2 points then, Matt. First of all, the issue of compelling kids to play.
Well, I completely agree. If a child does not want to play rugby, you can't force anyone to do that. So I completely agree with the argument. So there needs to be something there in terms of the curriculum. But on the other side, for individuals and parents and children who want to play the game, don't remove the contact situation. Train them well, coach them well. We're all in it together. But yeah, agreed. I mean, if you know, let's not have children who aren't being coached well, who don't want to be there, and expect them to not get injured. So I agree with that argument.
David, what do you think about compelling kids?
Well, my experience of playing school rugby was we had games once a week where the boys did play rugby, and that was our only option for the first few months of school. But we never played full contact rugby. I mean, you only played full contact rugby if you went to the after school clubs. So, you know, it was your choice to go and play those sports. I do agree that saying making kids play rugby when they don't want to shouldn't be done. I mean, it should be a choice. But I think for children who want to play rugby and want to be involved in the sport, they should be allowed to play contact rugby. I mean, if that's what they want to do, they should be allowed to do it. I think putting in a complete system of only touch rugby kind of takes away from those who want to play the actual sport.
Yes, of course, nobody's arguing for that. We're not arguing to take away contact rugby within the community level of play. We're arguing that within the school system and within the school system alone, where ministers have control of what happens with the curriculum, not the RFU, that's where rugby be played as touch or tag only.
Let's bring in the thoughts of viewers. Loads of people are getting in touch on this. You've sparked a big
Mostly
debate
rugby lovers,
here.
I imagine.
Well, yeah. I mean, mainly. Let's read through a few here. My son, Dino Girl, says lost his adult top front tooth at school due to bad tackle. He ended up needing root canal and still has problems. Somebody else, anonymous here. Rugby, ban skiing, horse riding, cycling, gymnastics as well. Keep kids in a padded room until 18.
None of those things are part of the national curriculum.
Someone else here, let children participate in touch rugby in junior school, then introduce the contact version in high school. And another one, tackling is about confidence. If you stop kids from learning it early, then there will be a lot more adult injuries.
Well, those kids that are compelled to play rugby won't go on to play rugby as adults because they don't enjoy rugby. What we're trying to do is protect kids who don't self-select into competitive contact rugby.
Juliet Hook, it shouldn't be banned. It's ridiculous to suggest it. As long as it is taught properly and the proper precautions are taken, there should be no issue. Accidents may happen in any sport. My son is 9 and is playing contact rugby for our local club. After playing 2 years of tag rugby, they introduce contact slowly over the next few years. All proper precautions are taken and he loves it, as do the other 45 children we have registered at this age group. Matt, over your career, did you see lots of friends and fellow players injured through the sport?
Yeah, I certainly did, and I had a number of injuries myself, concussion being one of them. And if I was around now in the protocol and the safety protocols that are going on, I think I'd be in a better place. Because, so, you know, but with evidence and with data, and let's remember data is big now. But what we don't want to get to a position of is where, you know, lawyers are making the money out of lawsuits and people suing because there's a grey area. I completely agree that if a child does not want to play rugby, they should not be forced to. But undermining the contact of the tackle area when it comes down to responsibility, I think is the key thing. And you know, years ago, 20 years ago, there were more. There's always been risk to the game of rugby, but now we can see it. We can make informed decisions, and that goes to the parents to say, and the child to agree between themselves whether they want to play rugby. And if they don't, they should take themselves out. The ones that do should crack on and enjoy what is one of the country's great cultural games.
Eric, a lot of people are saying it is character building, and if you take the tackling out of it, it just changes the game in a way that doesn't do that.
There is no research that shows that tackling itself is the character building component of rugby. If that was the case, then you'd also be saying that team sports that don't have tackling as a component are less effective in building character, building teammanship, and building cooperation amongst players, and that's simply not the case.
Matt and David, I mean, where you do really diverge from Eric is on this issue of whether taking tackling out does change the sport to an extent that makes it a completely different game. Why, Matt, do you think tackling is such an important element?
Because it's the camaraderie, it's the discipline of knowing how to tackle well. If you look at the professional game now, I agree, it's a 3-man tackle. One goes low, one high, and one on the ball.
Ouch.
So, it's quite physical, and you can imagine your back and your body, getting put in all different kinds of positions. But when I started first amateur rugby and then got into professional, it was my choice. But it's more about the core values of what rugby is. It's about respect, it's about teammanship, it's about camaraderie, and it's a self-awareness development and communication tool for kids.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Well, it's not about them, it's about their teammates. And if you're
Yes.
tracking inside and you're making a tackle, you know, you can look at your teammate and it builds character, because it doesn't even need to be a handshake, it's a look. And, you know, if we take the contact out, where do we stop?
Nothing he said is dependent upon tackle. The respect, the quality, the cooperation, the looks between teammates, none of that necessitates that children tackle each other.
I want the last word from David, because you did suffer a terrible injury. Your life changed as a result of playing rugby, yet you still love it. You don't want changes to be made. What is it that you gained from playing rugby then and now in a wheelchair?
Just a love for the sport. Just I never thought I would have played rugby growing up. You know, because no one in my family ever played rugby, and being introduced to it through school just built a love for the sport. I started playing sport seriously. I got fitter, stronger, and just overall had a better quality of life because of rugby, and still do, because of the sport I play now. So I mean, the contact element for me was always enjoyable. Again, kind of looking to your teammates and working for your teammates, putting your body in your line for your teammates, just gave me an energy that I can't describe that I've got anywhere else.
Thank you all very much, David, Eric and Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you. The debate is a lively one. Loads of comments coming in from you. Thank you for them, and do keep them coming in. We'll be talking more about it after 10, and we'll bring more of your comments in before then and during that conversation as well. Also coming up, we'll be talking to the mother of a young woman with schizophrenia who jumped off a cliff in Bristol, killing herself and her newborn daughter. And public executions, TV bans, constant bombings, life for ordinary people forced to live under so-called Islamic State in Syria. We will bring you the latest in our diary series. Now let's bring you right up to date with our main news this morning.